Namaste everyone. Welcome back children. Children, as we have taken up our topic states of matter, and in part 1 we have talked about the 3 states of matter, that is solid, liquid and gas. And now in this video session we'll talk about how matter can be changed from one state to another. That is how a solid can be converted into liquid, a liquid to gaseous state, or how can we obtain liquid from gas, or we can convert a liquid into solid state. So let us take up our topic, states of matter, part 2. Children, as you know, we have divided this topic into 3 parts. The first is the form of matter, that is solid, liquid and gas, and then the changes in the form of matter, in which we have terms like melting, evaporation, condensation and freezing. And then we have dissolving property of matter. Forms of matter we have already discussed in our part 1, and today in this video session we'll talk about the changes in the forms of matter. So let us take up a quick revision of what is matter. Anything that has mass and occupies space is called matter, and we know that matter has 3 forms. It exists in 3 forms, that is solid, liquid and gas. So let us continue to know more about matter, that all objects around us such as soil, water and air are made up of matter. Our body itself is made up of matter. Matter, or if we take the example of water, exists in 3 states: solid, that is ice; liquid, that is water; and gas, that is water vapor. So now let us take up the first process, and that is melting. Ice, which is a solid form of water, when heated converts to water or liquid, and this process is called melting. As you can see here, the arrangement of particles in case of solids is somewhat like this, closely packed, and on heating they melt to give rise to liquid. That means when we heat solids, the particles, they start moving away from each other and they become less tightly packed, or we can say that they become loosely packed. And we know that if they are loosely packed molecules, they are definitely liquids. So let us take up some examples of melting. These are very common examples of melting. As you can see, the solid ice is converting into water, and similar is the case with your ice creams or chocolates, that on heating they melt into liquids. So we can say that solids have very tightly packed particles. When solids are heated, the particles move farther from each other. If heating is continued, a stage is reached when the particles move so far from each other that they become so loose that the solid matter changes into liquid. And now children, let us take up a demonstration on melting. So here we have this pan with ice in it, and we'll ignite the gas stove. So once the ice will heat up, it will start melting. And we know that ice is a solid form in which particles are closely packed. But once the particles, they get heated up, they start moving away from each other, and so the ice, the solid ice, is converting into liquid water. And this process of converting of solid to liquid on heating is called melting. So now let us see what happens to this water when we heat it further. So our next process is evaporation. Water, which is a liquid, when heated converts to water vapor or gas, and this process is called evaporation. So we know that arrangement of particles in liquids is somewhat like this. They are loosely packed. On heating, they evaporate to form gas. Again, these loosely packed particles, they will start moving away from each other on heating further, and then they will evaporate to form water vapor or gas. Here you can see the arrangement of molecules in gas, that they are very far from each other. And And now let us see some examples of evaporation. This is a very common evaporation process which takes place in your kitchen as well. When the water is heated, it gives rise to steam, that is the water vapor. And water vapor is the gaseous form of water. And in nature as well, the continuous evaporation is taking place from the surface of the water because of the heat of the sun. So, liquids have loosely packed particles. When liquids are heated, the particles move farther from each other. If heating is continued, a stage is reached when the particles move so far from each other or become so loose that the liquid matter changes into gas. So let us see the demonstration of evaporation. So for demonstration, we have this steam inhaler with us. This is the jar of the steam inhaler wherein I have put some water, and now I am going to fix it in the inhaler. Now we know that evaporation takes place on heating. So for heating the water, I'll simply switch on the steam inhaler. Now after some time you will realize that liquid water will convert into gaseous form, that is the steam, once it gets heated. That means the particles or molecules will start moving away from each other on heating, and they form the steam or the gas. So this process is called evaporation. Now children, in our next process, we'll see what happens to these water vapors when we cool them. So our next process is condensation. Water vapor or gas, when cooled, converts to water or liquid, and this process is called condensation. Now we are going to reverse the process. Till now we were heating up the matter, and now we'll cool down the matter. So we know the arrangement of particles in case of gases is like this, and once they condense to form liquids, here as we know that on cooling the particles will come closer to each other and the gas will take up the form of liquid. So let us take up the example of condensation. These are very common examples of condensation. If you take out a chilled water bottle from the fridge and keep it outside for some time, you will realize that after some time there are water droplets sticking on the outer surface of the bottle. So basically what happens is the water vapor which are present in the air, when they touch the cold surface of the bottle, they condense to form water droplets. And when we say condense to form water droplet, means that vapors, they come closer to each other and they form water, and this process is called condensation. And similar is the case with window panes. You must have seen no water droplets on window panes. It mostly occurs in winters. When water vapor present in the air, they touch the cold surface of the glass, then they condense to form droplets like this. So gases have very loose particles. When gases are cooled, the particles come closer to each other. A stage is reached when the particles move closer to each other, that is, now they are not packed loosely. Then the gas changes into liquid. So children, let us see a demonstration on condensation. So children, in continuation with our process of melting, we'll heat this water further, and then after some time on further heating it will start boiling. Once the water will start boiling, it will give rise to steam. Now you can see that the water has started boiling. Now I'll put this lid over this boiling water because we are not able to see the steam. So now the steam or the water vapor, they are touching the cold surface of this lid, and as you can see here, once they touch the cold surface of the lid, they form water droplets. So as we know that particles, they come closer to each other when they cool down. And now we'll move on to the next process, and that is freezing. And water, which is a liquid, when cooled, it converts to ice, that is the solid state, and it happens on freezing. So liquids where the arrangement of particles is loose like this, when we cool them further, then they freeze to form solids. That is, the particles, they come closer to each other to form solids, and they do not leave any scope for movement. And let us take up some common examples of freezing. So this is a very common example of freezing, how you freeze ice in your fridge with water. And definitely the freezing process is taking place on the mountains as well when the temperature becomes very cold. So liquids have loosely packed particles. When liquids are cooled, the particles come closer to each other. A stage is reached when the particles move so close to each other or become tightly packed that the liquid matter changes into solid. So children, now let us take up a demonstration on freezing. So as you can see here, I have this ice tray with me. Now I'll fill all its compartments with water, and we know the property of water, that it can be poured, it can take the shape of the container. That means when I'll freeze it, the ice cubes that I'll get will be of similar shape. Now we'll keep this tray in the fridge for few hours. And now we know that on cooling, the particles, they will come closer and then they will solidify and we'll get ice cubes like this. And this process of converting of liquid into solid on cooling is called freezing. Children, now let us understand all these four processes with the help of a single diagram. We know that water changes forms on heating or cooling. So for example, if we take up the solid ice, then we know that on heating, the particles of solid will start moving away from each other and they will melt to form liquids. And if we further heat up these liquids, again the arrangement of particles in liquid will also change. They will heat up and they will start moving away from each other, or we'll say that they will evaporate to form water vapor or gas. Now we'll come to the cooling process. We know that particles on cooling, they start coming closer to each other. So particles which are there in gaseous form on cooling will condense to form liquids. And if we further cool down the liquid, we know that it will freeze into solid ice. That means the particles in liquids, they will come closer to each other and they will form solids. So we can conclude that matter changes from one state to another on heating or cooling. Now children, with this we'll move on to the keywords. So first is melting. We know it is the process in which solids convert to liquids on heating. Evaporation is the process in which liquids convert to gases on heating. Condensation is the process in which gases convert to liquids on cooling. And freezing is the process in which liquids convert to solids on cooling. Now let us move on to the recapitulation section to know what all we have understood. State whether the following statements are true or false. Solids turn to liquids on cooling. That is false. We know that solids, they turn to liquids on heating, because on heating only the particles, they start moving away from each other. Gases turn to liquids on heating. That is again false, because gases, they turn to liquids on cooling, as in cooling process the particles, they start coming closer to each other. Liquids turn to solids on cooling. That is true. Then gases turn to liquids on cooling. That is also true. So with this, let us move on to the think and answer section, and our today's question is, how does water change its form? Explain with the help of a diagram. And if you remember this diagram, Given on slide number 13, we have to explain this diagram. So children, with this we come to the end of today's session, and I want to advise you that if you are interested in performing any of the activities which are given here in this video, you should be doing it in the presence of some elderly person at home. So this was all about the changes in the states of matter, and in our next video session we'll talk about the property of solids to get dissolved in liquids. So until then, take care of yourselves.